and welcome. Welcome to the Blessed Podcast, where we join Jesus where he is already at work, where we live, learn, work, and play. At Love KC, we believe that every person should hear the good news of Jesus from a friend. If that's going to happen, it will take all of us. The letters BLESS in the Blessed Podcast stand for begin with prayer, listen to God and to those around you, eat together, serve, and share. Share your story and share his story. As always, we have free resources to help you live on mission at our website, lovekc.net, and there you can find upcoming events. We interview a wide range of people on the Blessed Podcast, well-known authors, speakers, and leaders, plus everyday people, because we want you to meet those you might not get to meet on your own, and we want you to be able to identify with someone a lot like you. Our podcast drops the 15th and 30th of the month. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and share. Now let's jump into this episode of the Blessed Podcast with your host, Gary Kendall, and co-host, Samantha Lane Krebs.
Well, welcome to the Blessed Podcast, where we join Jesus where he's already at work, where we live, learn, work, and play. And I'm excited today to be able to have you join Clinton Morris, who's our guest. So welcome, Clinton.
Hi.
We're so glad that you're here. And Clinton's going to be talking to us about his ministry, Four Spaces. And as you listen to it, I want to encourage you to think about how that God has given you different opportunities to minister in the spaces where you live, you learn, you work, and play. And maybe perhaps even to think about what's next in those spaces. Maybe some of them for you, it's something that's, you know about it, but you're using it passively. And maybe there's a next step where you might be able to take it to the next level. So Clinton's going to help us with that. Before we go there, let me just say that I encourage you to subscribe to the Apple iTunes, to Google Play, or to Spotify. Really, on all of the major networks, you can find the Blessed Podcast. And then you can watch the video if you want on our Facebook page. It's Living on Mission. It's a Facebook group, and it's connected to Love KC. So those are the different ways you can find it. Oh yeah, one more. I almost forgot. So on YouTube, we have a way to access the Blessed Podcast, and just encourage you to not only watch this, but you can watch others, share with your friends, like, subscribe, and we'll be able to continue to tell this story. So Clinton, welcome. Why don't you tell the guests a little bit about who you are and your family and ministry? Let's start there.
Yeah, so my name is Clinton Morris, and I am 38 years young, I guess. So I am currently a father of 6 children, and I've been married for 12 years. We're in our 13th year of marriage. My wife's name is Deanna. And thank you. Yeah, my children range from the ages of 9, 8, 7, 4, 2, and then we will have a newborn in November. So
awesome. You guys have a busy household, I'm sure.
we like to say it's controlled chaos. Some days it's just chaos.
Yes, sometimes controlled and sometimes chaos, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's just like, Jesus, what have we done? So
right. Well, Clinton and I got to meet at the conference for Underground in Lenexa, Kansas, which was really, really inspiring. Just a great time for us to be able to share with people who are doing entrepreneurial kinds of things like Clinton is doing, and all the people who are doing what we encourage on the Blessed Podcast. These are people who are living on mission, and sometimes by affinity, sometimes by geography, sometimes with a designated place. They're using their gifts, their life experiences, and skills, sometimes even their life pain, to be able to minister to others and invite them into the spaces to where they can find Jesus. So, but maybe give us tell me a little bit about the backstory in where you got this idea, and then through another question or two, we'll have you kind of come up to date to tell people what you're doing and how they can connect with you.
Okay. Yeah, great. So just my background is I grew up in a traditional church in the north, in the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches, which they're now RBC, Regular Baptist Churches,
Right.
as a conference. And I grew up there in Wisconsin, and went to three different churches in my young childhood. I got saved at 4.5. I'm 8th generation in Christianity.
Sweet.
I am most recent pastor, although the rest of the ones that went into ministry are long gone. So, and at age of 15, I felt called to full-time ministry, and I didn't know what that fully meant, but I felt like if you're going to go into full-time ministry, and I'm a very competitive guy, so I felt like, let's go for senior pastor, boy, was I, God did some things there, to help alleviate me of my desire to be in a role that was not suitable for me.
Yeah. Teaches us, doesn't he?
He does. He really does. So
he's a good father.
Yes, he knows what we need. Went to started going to school, Maranatha Baptist Bible College in Watertown, Wisconsin. Transferred from there to Pensacola Christian College. That's where I met my wife, and so she's from Jonesboro, Arkansas, and we went together back 2011. Got married, started my master's degree in Watertown, Wisconsin, back at Maranatha, and I had no plans of leaving Wisconsin at all. But God pretty much said, "Hey, I need you to leave. I need you to go to Arkansas." And I looked at every door that I could possibly open in Wisconsin and realized there was obedience or there was disobedience, and I could have tried to fight my way. And so, frustratingly, God was right. I had to go to Arkansas with no idea of what we were headed to do. And
but I love it that you are flexible, because so many times whenever we have a dream, or we have, something that we're doing and God interrupts it, people can pout, or they can, throw a fit, or they can, back away from God, but you leaned into it. So good for you on that one.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, what I say is, during that time, there was a lot of loud car rides. And so I was using my prayer time was in my car.
Yeah.
I would drive around and just question and ask, and God didn't budge. And then God also didn't change his mind.
Right.
So we moved, pack up 2 pickup trucks, moved to Arkansas, and then back into my in-laws. We moved into my in-laws' house, upper floor, and we had a little space there. And then for 3 weeks, I just kind of sat there trying to figure out what God wanted from us in that space, and then realized that we were going to go into church planting with my father-in-law. So we started a church there in Truman, Arkansas, called Victory Lighthouse Baptist Church. And at that time, the question that we were trying to answer is, how do we reach drug addicts? And we started out a ministry that was very relational, trying to help people in their mess, and trying to have a 24/7 kind of response to how to reach people that are quickly going back to their drugs and everything else.
Right.
And at that time, I was bivocational, so I was in management with Cricket Wireless, which was a product of AT&T, and I was a coach trying to build teams that were successful, and I'm also on the sales force and trying to figure out how to navigate all that. And we just started having children, and then it was 2017 that God said, "Hey, you're done here at Victory Lighthouse." And I was like, okay. I don't know what that is. I just feel God's leading us. And sat with my father-in-law, and he did not like that, but we prayed for a month together, and he came back and said, God is leading you on. So December of 2017, we moved on. 2018, we are, I thought I was going to go to work for AT&T corporate as a kind of a trainer, building teams that are successful and creating training experiences around that, teams that work well together, play nice together, and sell better, with some of the thought process that we were trying to make happen. And a pastor friend of mine stepped into my life and just said, "Do you think God is done with the ministry for you?" I said, "I don't know. And so he said, well, maybe you should reach out. And I said, oh, is that how it's done? Okay. So I reached So I sent an email out to quite a few at the time GRBC guys over states and these directors, and I had 37 emails in my email box from churches
That's
needing
amazing.
senior pastors. Yeah,
Yeah. Hey,
just crazy.
I want to pause here before you go on with the story, but just to say this, would you say that when you look back at the path that God's had you on, that He's used all of these different things, to
Mm,
lead up to what you're doing today? You haven't got to that part yet, but
yeah,
I've heard you say, you're serving in a role as an associate, you're working a part-time job, you're learning on that job about building teams, and I know the rest of the story because I've heard it before.
yeah,
But I think maybe just pause here for a moment and talk about how that God's used all these things, to bring you to the place where you are today. Because I think that could encourage someone who maybe is in a place where they're going, wow, I
mm,
just don't see how what I'm doing today, is really all I'm called to do. But it could be like a step on the journey. So talk about that.
yeah. So the reflection on that is that God has been using everything all along the way. 2015, I'm a board gamer. So for those that don't know, this is
My son would love that.
my hobby that I love to participate in. I have a library. It fluctuates, but the largest it's been is 2,000 games. It
Oh
currently is
my
more manageable.
goodness. Wow.
It's more manageable right now because we've moved, so it's about
Yeah.
350 games right
Oh
now.
my
So,
goodness.
but so I started designing things back in 2016. I got bored with one of my brother-in-laws, and we were at a church function that we were helping out with at a park, and our booth wasn't being well attended, and so to pass the time, designed a game to keep my brother-in-law and I distracted, and then I went on to actually publish that game,
Very
which
good.
so we started using our love of hobby to be able to interact with people. I started getting meetings with publishers. I started getting meeting with designers and other people that most individuals wouldn't normally have had contact with. And I just realized that if you were a person that loves what other people love and you care about them, you'll eventually get to the point where you can tell them about Jesus.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, so uh, it was 2016 that part began to play a role in it. And then I didn't really realize I was going to use these things. We like to use the word intentional. I was
Right.
just kind of accidentally doing it,
Right.
right? So there wasn't a lot of intentional pieces to the puzzle. And so to the person that's saying, hey, how is God right now going to use everything that I'm going through? God doesn't waste anything at
Right.
all.
Very good. I like that.
There's a lot of things that there are uncomfortable things. Sometimes God tests our obedience. I feel that often in my story is that God has
Yeah.
tested my obedience, and whether I'll step out in blind faith, knowing that God's leading but not knowing the destination,
Yeah.
or
I
the
love that.
and it's hard because God developed me as a person that needs to see end goals, and I have a checklist right here. I build checklists every day for myself to kind of think through what do I need to accomplish, what are high level things, going on, so forth. But God doesn't always treat me that way or operate in the way that I mentally would like him to. He messes my schedule up. He changes everything
Right.
else, and I've had to start realizing that God interruptions are the things to pay attention to, and that when God moves, you follow.
I'm getting some good quotes here.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't despise the God interruptions in your life. Another thing,
Mm,
Quentin, I would say along with that is that God doesn't shrink back from asking his people to do hard things. And
yeah.
And I think that when he asks us to do something hard, he doesn't want us to, act entitled. Like if we're making less today than we made a year ago, or if the job that we're doing in this particular moment in time is maybe more challenging, either more physical or more demanding emotionally, or, has more stress or something, that God is honored when we say yes, whether,
Yeah.
no matter what the degree of difficulty is, or, or even if it's something that's where we're being more of a servant, in some roles than other roles. And I think that when we can give him our yes, and it's unconditional, and then we serve with the same amount of joy and excitement, that's very honoring to our Father.
No, I absolutely agree. So leaving a church plant in 2017 was hard, but it was what God wanted. We thought we were going to go work for AT&T corporate. That ended up not happening. In fact, that is such a crazy story what happened there. But we ended up going to Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, about 2 hours outside of Vegas, 1 hour outside of Flagstaff, or above Phoenix. And we went through some hardship. We lost one of our children, who was 18 weeks along, Dempsey Dean. And yeah, so it was a troubling time. We went, and I was senior pastor at a church that was 50 years old. And I started realizing, and God, 6 months in, I felt him ask me, "Are you happy in this role?" And I shrugged it off. I just said, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, right." And then it was not until another 3 months later from there, I was pacing a hall in the church, as I would do, barefoot. I was just thinking about what God had kind of came to me with, and I had watched my wife in kind of a depression and some other things that were going on, and we had some frustrating things that were going on behind the scenes for us. And I kind of came back and just said, "Okay, God, why did you ask that?" And he said,
Right.
"I didn't make you for this. I didn't make you for this." And I was like, "Oh," and I got mad. I was really upset.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in this position. We moved 21 hours. We're in the middle of, so at that time, my house in Arkansas didn't sell. So we're in between a mortgage and a rental, and just trying to figure out our role in this church and all these other things. And, I decided, you know what? I'm going to pretend I didn't hear you. That only goes so far. God knew I heard. And God wanted me to vacate the position, but I didn't know how, and I didn't want to, and my pride was on the line. And I fought back. For 2 months, I was in a role where I should not have been. I was disobedient. God showed me through my wife going through this most severe spiritual depression I've ever witnessed her ever go through. When she's the positive, optimistic one, I'm the realistic. I call it realism, but it's pessimism. But we try really hard. God's works with me on. So she goes through a very spiritually dark time, and there was often times where she would put the kids in the playroom. She would shut the door and lay in front of the door, and just so that she could kind of just cope with the mental things that she was going through. And she didn't have much of a support network. We were 21 hours away.
Well, no doubt
Finally,
she was grieving over that loss too.
That's that
grief
too.
Grief takes so long. And we sometimes we think the grief has a shorter, length of time than it actually does. But typically, when you've lost a child like you have, and I've lost a child too, it's usually 3 to 5 years before you see people really start. You can touch health and wholeness, at times before that for sure. But when you see people like walking in a place where they've healed and they've been able to feel restored, and they're moving on into the new that God has for them, it typically is 3 to 5 years at the shortest.
No, I believe it. She was pregnant with our fourth this side of heaven. Her name is Catalina. She was pregnant with her, and she didn't feel like she was getting very good medical care and all this other things that were happening. And so 11 months in, I sat down with her and I just said, hey, I gotta confess some things. And she's like, well, what's going on? And I said, I've been fighting with God. And I know it's not right, and I know I've
Always a
lost.
losing battle.
Oh, yeah. It was the casualty that God was going to show me wasn't worth it, the fight. And really, I had lost all joy of the position I was in. And I knew I wasn't there. And so it was a lot. And I sat down with Deanna, and she's like, well, what do we do now? And I said, I don't know, because I know God hasn't been hearing me. And if he is hearing me, he isn't answering me. And I said, so we have to come up with, I said, I think I know what the right answer is. I think it's we vacate, but I don't know that. I don't know if it's that we just recognize the fact that it's not our position to hold or to want, and we'll find out if God wants to keep us there. And so we put out a fleece and asked something that seems like the impossible, which is there's a medical practice in Jonesboro that the doctor that Deanna had that helped us with all of our other children. It's very busy practice, and normally they put you on a waiting list. So I said, hey, call, and if they put you on a waiting list, we're staying. If they don't put you on a waiting list, i.e. you have an appointment scheduled, then I will quit. I will resign. And so it was about 45 minutes later. I had driven up to the church just to pray, and it was a Wednesday, and trying to think through Wednesday night stuff that I had going on, and I had a couple other sessions that I was doing with some people. And she calls me 45 minutes later, and she goes, 3 weeks from now, I have an appointment. I'm on the calendar. She goes, what are we doing? I said, get on to, buy tickets to go home. I said, that's clear what God wants us to do. I said, we'll immediately obey this, and we'll vacate. I said, I'm going to go talk to some deacons and have an awkward conversation. And that's what happened. Then we had COVID. I interim pastored during COVID. They called me to be their senior pastor, and I asked God if I could be a senior pastor, and God said no. And so he wanted me to start new things. So I was on the right track towards going back into church planting.
Yeah, you have more of an apostolic gift, it seems like.
Yeah, which is good to find out.
Yeah,
so 2019 through 2020, I was an interim pastor for a little bit with a small church in Jonesboro, and then helped them find a new pastor. And then I went into church planting, and we weren't sure where God wanted us to be. I asked Deanna. She was very much against being very far away from her parents, her mom especially, who had been kind of a support role at the time, and she's still recovering from a lot of things. And I understood and wasn't going to fight that. So I said, okay, what do you see? And she said 4 hours. And so we prayed over a map that we cut out 4 hours away from her mom and dad. And I didn't feel like it was in there, and she didn't feel like it either. We came back and kind of compared notes after praying for a month, and just said, I don't think God's. And so we added an hour, and I had a friend moving to Shreveport, Louisiana, that I was like, yeah, that's falls in my thought process, like forcing God's hand to let us go somewhere. And that wasn't it at all. He ended up moving us to the opposite diagonal of the map altogether. To a place called Rogers, which was Northwest Arkansas, and it ended up not even being Rogers. We got priced out of the market and ended up in Springdale, Arkansas.
I've been through there.
Okay, yeah. So that whole place is booming right now.
Yeah.
Walmart country, which I had no idea what that was, which found out. So we go out there, and during that time, that church plant that we planted out there called The Table was a direct answer to how do we reach nerd culture, which is for us, the people that we gravitate to, which are board gamers. For some, it's video gamers. For some, it's cosplay, which is people that dress up like their favorite character. You got anime, you've got comic books, you've got videos, movies, all kinds of things fall underneath nerd culture or nerdy things. Dungeons and Dragons is kind of a hallmark or usual suspect. So we went out there to begin to reach a culture. COVID shut down a lot of the places that people were meeting, as it tended to do. So when we came, we thought, I had a few people that I knew in the area. I just started asking them, hey, how do we bring the community back together again? How do we sit around tables? And no one wanted to do it. And so I asked my wife, I said, hey, what if we, opened up our house? And so we began talking through what that would look like. And it was 7 to midnight on Friday nights. And so we did that for 3 weeks, and the community didn't really show up. And I was like, okay. So I reached back out to the community. We had 5 people show up, and 4 of them were my friends. And one was a guy that kind of came because he was tagging in. And that was it. And I was like, wow, okay. So I polled the community and just said, hey, what do you guys think? And they came back and said, the day we would like is Monday. And I was like, I would never have thought Monday, So the overwhelming majority said Monday, and we said, okay, well, why Monday? And everybody said because they hated Mondays. They had things that they could do Friday, Saturday, some Sunday, but for Monday being the first day of work, it was so depressing to them that if they had some event that they could look forward to, that they would go. And so I was like, all right.
And the good thing is you ask. Sometimes sometimes we just assume, but you ask.
Well, I assume.
And you listened.
Yeah. Well, experimenting to fail is something, and fail quick, and then learn from your failure is something that I don't know how to help people learn that. If you can learn that in ministry, if you can experiment for the sake of getting some data, if you can adjust the dials, have conversation with the people that you're trying to reach and say, hey, is this working for you guys? They'll come back. They'll tell you what's going to actually work.
Yeah. If you have a good relationship.
Yes. That is key. That is key too. Having a good relationship. And so, and which we did. We had some very good friends that were in that community. And so being able to have those conversations. So
that's great.
During that time, we opened up our house from 7 to 2 in the morning. We ran it for 48 weeks just to see what, this would all be. I didn't know 48 weeks. We ended up running for a year, but because of holidays, things, it had to be 48 weeks. So over the course of that, we had, my wife kept a semblance of attendance. These numbers are pretty accurate. So we had 366 unique individuals come through our house.
That's amazing, Clinton. Good for you.
We had 10 tables set up that could hold between 4 and 6 people. Wow. So average attendance was somewhere in 50s once we started getting going. Took about, I want to say it took about 10 weeks to really start hitting those numbers. They would come in shifts. So we'd have the 7 to 10 shift, and then you'd have the 9:30-ish to 2 in the morning. And then some of those people stayed till 5 in the morning, a handful. And we weren't playing games anymore.
We're just wanting to finish the game, huh?
No, actually not. They were just sitting on couches, and we were having conversation that were really deep about things that were going on in these people's lives. And they knew that me and my wife were Christians, and they just felt safer in our house than they did going home. And we started realizing the pace of relationship.
Right.
People opened up themselves and just realized. And so during that time, we wrote down all these prayer cards for these people. So we'd write their name down, or write a little bit of the story that we would get from them, and we begin to pray for them. And God opened up a lot of doors. So 366 people, we couldn't keep track of all of them. I did follow up, and not all of them were the people that God wanted us to continue to follow up with, and it ended up being about 48 people that we are still in relationship with.
That's
And it's
really
been about,
significant.
yeah, yeah. So it's about a person a week, right? Because
Yeah,
48 weeks,
sure.
about 48 people, right? It's something that we can actually manage. Now, I knew 366 people by name. I don't know much about their stories too much now, but 48 people I actually can still continue. And then of those, I took about 28 of them out to coffee or to some more sort of second meetup space to get more of their story. And some of them I took out to multiple coffee moments.
Yeah,
And we of those, three came to Christ.
that's really good. Really good. You know,
Yeah.
it'd be hard for me to imagine it would be more than that, just
Right.
from what I've learned over time. I mean, those numbers seem really consistent. And we ought to emphasize this to people who are listening, that I think sometimes people are unrealistic and they
Yeah.
think they're just going to move a lot faster than they do. And
No.
occasionally you will find that person who's just really ready and God connects you to them. But a whole lot of the time it's not that. It's real it moves at a snail's pace. It really moves at the speed of trust. When they
Yeah.
trust you, it moves faster. When they don't, it doesn't. And that may not have much to do with you because it
No.
could have a lot to do with them as far as their level of trust. But I love what you're illustrating here. So you started talking a little bit about spaces now. Pick
Yeah.
up on that so that the person who saw your
Sure.
name for space kind of
Yeah.
knows, okay, well, you mentioned second space a minute ago. Talk about how they all work together.
Yeah. So and this all came through post plant clarity. So we planted the table. Some things happened where we got to see healthy rhythms, what actually occurred, and then we've been in the process. We're 13 months in now of just dissecting everything that worked, what didn't work, and being able to assess the whole thing. And so, from what we have seen, we've come up with this concept of 4 spaces. And let me walk you through that. So, space 1 is, who are the people that God wants you to reach? What are the communities that God has specifically either tasked you with or gifted you to be able to be in? And these are spaces that you're probably already a part of on a day-to-day basis. We just didn't know that we should be intentional. That's a key word, intentionally missional. So what for us, Deanna and I, we gravitate to board gamers really well. Now I can also gravitate to cyclists. I a long distance bike ride, and I really enjoy that. And I know some people in that community, and I can talk with them for hours about what gear they use and how they do what they do, and just marvel at those kind of things. But find the people that you can sit down and have a normal conversation with. It's like learning to be friends again.
Yeah, we've
Uh,
forgotten that in our culture, honestly.
we really have. Social media has done such a number
Yep,
on it. COVID did a number on it.
right.
If we're at the highest level of distrust of individuals,
And loneliness,
yeah, this is why suicidal ideation is at its
right,
highest.
right,
Because people can't trust each other in community, and that breaks down the social boundaries, and then you just have people that isolate out of fear.
right.
So we're asking Christians, hey, you're in communities already. What does it look like to be intentional there? And for us, we build a practical, because we understand everybody's got these magnificent expectations out of themselves, like, oh, I'm going to go and meet everybody there and talk to everybody. And we're asking you, don't do that. Learn
Yeah,
one person. Okay,
right,
if this week you're going to go to the ball game, okay, great. Turn to the seat behind you or the seat beside you or the seat in front of you. Learn one person's name
yeah,
and learn a little bit of their story, and then find a way to follow up with them. So there's
yeah,
3 things in the ask that you're kind of asking yourself to do
okay,
each week in space 1. So Then there's the intentional discipleship part of it. Meet up with some other believers in the week. It could either be via phone call or after church, and pray about the people that you're engaging with.
Yeah, yeah.
Because prayer is, we lead in prayer and we lead out of prayer.
Right.
Prayer is all part of everything that we have there. And so praying over the individual and then follow up. So that channel that they gave you, hey, really enjoyed seeing you at such and such thing. If it's something that you regularly do, hey, can't wait to see you again. It'd be fun if you sat near us again. It was awesome seeing you. Or if they told you something about what's going on in their week, following up. These are normal things. Following up with them. They might not feel like it's very normal because it's kind of becoming a foreign thing to care in our culture.
Right. Yes.
But the fact that you listened and the fact that you're following up showed that you actually were listening.
Right. And people are really hungry for kindness. Like, that's one thing that people just never turn down.
No. Yeah.
Sometimes they do push it away because they don't believe it's real. But once they figure out it's real, then they don't push it away.
Consistent action in the same direction, right? We are showing that we are loved by doing consistent action that demonstrates that we do love them.
Right.
And so as these relationships are forming, and so this is awareness connections, we're making people aware that there are Christians that care. We're building connections, so we're getting names and we're getting some information. And then we're moving them to some relational aspects of being able to actually build relationships. This is going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. There is no rushing it. It's just, it's just consistent nature. There's a statistic out there about the nones. Nones, those are those people that are no religion at all. And I'm sure those people on this podcast are familiar with that concept.
Right.
But it says it takes 4 to 5 years of intentional outreach or intentional friendship, really, at the end of the day, to reach them with Jesus Christ.
Right. And we can actually harm it by trying to go too fast.
Yes. Yep. Or as Christians, we lose heart, right? If the end goal is to see them saved, which I think we all have the ultimate goal of seeing that, right? But at the end, if that is our only goal in that, you will lose heart.
You will. Yep.
If your goal is to be their friend and build a relationship so that they can see who Jesus is, it's a much more attainable goal because we can actually do stuff in that, because you can't save anyone.
Right. Yeah, I think you said something really key right there, that we forget sometimes that the onus for this person making a decision is on God. Like, he's a savior, we're not. We have a role to play, but whether they come to Christ or don't come to Christ isn't on us. It's a choice that they have to make, and they have that availability to find God anywhere, anytime. We're like a guide or a helper on the way. But once we start feeling like we own it, or we're owning that responsibility for them, or we get a notch in our belt, or somehow we're a better person because of that, all those things actually get in the way of helping that person to own their own decision in the timing as God leads them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so as we are in First Space, community space, we are following up, we're building these relationships. And then as we begin to see that spiritual conversations may take place, or that we want to get to know more about this person just because they've been sitting in our relationship zone for a bit, let's move them to coffee. And whatever looks like coffee for that individual. So it could be going out to eat. It could be, we've done go to the park with our families. We've done like whatever that looks like. That's going to open up a moment to have a real conversation. And sometimes in the space of community, it's loud. We're about the event. We're not going to be maybe fully transparent. And even in moving us to a second, so we call it second space. It's called the store. It's coffee and then story. So we try to get a moment where we can get away, and that also protects first space. So if your first space, like for me, it was board game night at my house was my first space.
Yep.
Well, I don't want you to come there and think that Clinton Morris is going to evangelize you every time you come in the door. And that's my main,
Right.
and once I evangelize you, for some people, that's going to be the end of it. And the people in the other room that hear that I was evangelizing, that's going to be ended for them. And so it's a vicious cycle. Now, if I move you to second space, where I'm intentionally going to learn a little bit more about you, hear your story, but then I can share Jesus in those moments, because it's a natural thing where I'm able to show you what's very important in my life as well. And I'm taking the time to do that. That protects first space. So if you didn't like that, you still can come to the event. And what we're looking for is, the fact that we want you to be in our realm, because once we offend you to the point that you're gone, well, you're gone.
Yeah,
In we don't get you back.
Right.
We don't get to continue to follow up.
Right.
And that's a tragedy. I don't like to see that. So second space it's more the spiritual transformational conversations, the relationships. And then as those things continue to form, we've had some people come to Christ there. 2 of the people came to Christ there. We've invited them to one of 2 things. We call it third space. So third space is a bridge. That's a picture of it. It's for those people that aren't ready to come to church. And it's for those people that still want to have some of these spiritual conversations, intentionally talking about some spiritual things, and being around people that maybe they've seen at the event. And so we have Discovery Bible Study being one of our transition pieces.
I love that.
It's great, especially when you can have the lost individuals in there who are now also kind of understanding who Jesus is, and they're able to speak back into that. And there's some wonderful things that can happen in that type of a community, and they know it's intentional too, because they're coming because they want to be in those conversations and have their viewpoint to be heard.
Right.
And then another group that we are working with is Preston Ulmer wrote a book called The Doubters Club, and Doubters Club is to help reach those that are atheists, and at least with friendship initially. And it also allows us to tell our worldview and model friendship, which some really key pieces there. And sometimes it's really helpful to the entire process to hear your own worldview come out of your own mouth.
Right.
So
I need to articulate this better than I did this time.
Right, exactly. And for the atheists and the other unbelievers that are in the room as well, because it's anybody that has an opposing worldview to Christianity that isn't ready to necessarily jump into a Bible study. I mean, it's going to be a great kind of club. It's a once a month thing, not heavy commitments, that allow us to model friendships, and then get to see each other at our communities or wherever else we're meeting them.
Right.
So these 2 different spaces have also helped us be able to see how to maturate Christians who are leaders. And then oftentimes a Christian that's a leader there gets to decide, hey, are these people that we're leading to Christ, that are leading to these spaces, will they fit into my church context? And if the answer is no, then for space, it becomes a church planting opportunity or a micro church planting opportunity, where we get to say, can we create a interactive space that models 1, 2, and 3 towards this community, and then also gives you guys back ownership of the discipleship piece. So and that's ultimately what we're doing.
I love that, Clinton. You explained that well, and what I like about that is other people can think about their situations. Like for some, they have a gym culture. They're working out at a gym. For another person, it's that they are meeting with people who are parents while their kids do theater, or their kids they play soccer together, or there's so many different contexts that you can take these same spaces and apply them there. It'll look a little bit differently, feel differently, but the concept is the same. And I love the fact that you've illustrated that. We're about at the end of our time today, but Clinton, if you were to say to a person who wanted to contact you, how they could get a hold of you, how would a person find you or intercept what you're doing if they had some more questions and wanted to learn more?
Yeah, so we have a webpage. It is 4-spaces.org. And you can reach us out there. You can you can email me at clinton@4-spaces.org. It's a number 4, not written out. So the number 4-spaces. Yeah, not spelled out. So you can reach me there at either of those 2 spaces. We have right now we're looking at starting up a weekly call. We have our first call next week, July 16th. Just with some people. We have a group similar to what you were even saying. We're a group that's reaching the paranormal community. We have another group that's reaching the skateboard community. Yeah. So there's 2 different communities that they're trying to figure out how do we intentionally reach. And then what we're providing is not telling you a detailed strategy with step-by-step things. We're giving you a framework of healthy habits for people to use. And then eventually you can just throw away the entire guide because it's just ingrained. Like, I don't look at a check sheet every day and say, oh, Clinton, did you do X, Y, and Z? No, I know now how to live through this and also at the Holy Spirit's prompting. And so, yeah.
Very good.
So those 2 spaces, you can get a hold of me. And then we also have a Discord group, but you would have to contact me to get invited into that. But we're having some text conversations, and then we have some different spaces where you can come and pray with us as well. So we'd love anybody that sees this as something that they can do. It's easy. It's easy, but it does require you to do it. So
yeah. I love it, Clinton. I'm so glad that we ran into each other at that conference. For Underground. And God bless you and what you're doing. Thank you for persevering through the hard times. Thank you for the lessons that you've learned, because you've articulated them really well today. And my guess and belief is that people who are listening can go, oh, you know what? I'm going to be more intentional. Or I'm not going to despise when God interrupts me, or I am going to say yes and obey and not fight with God when he's trying to move me. So there's a lot of takeaways for today. Thank you, brother. God bless you. And for those of you who are listening today, I just want to encourage you to if this has been helpful to you, to share it with someone else. You can save the link, you can share, and just invite people to the Blessed Podcast so that we can learn from each other. And I'll close with the same way that I opened. We're out to follow Jesus and join him where he's already at work, where we live, learn, work, and play. So go do that. God bless you. Thank you, Clinton.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it for this episode of the Blessed Podcast. We hope this podcast informed and encouraged you. Remember to subscribe on your favorite format, iTunes, Google Play, or YouTube. If you want to see the interview on Zoom, hop over to our Love KC Living on Mission Facebook group. Have a blessed day.